let me tell you, you've got to do it in 15 minutes. That's a little bit history of cloud. Part of our perspective is, again, as you look over the South by Southwest conference with all of the different things on identity, privacy, and data, and all the different angles, is those aren't different problems. They are interlocking axes of the same problem. We've got to get down to the root and to the core and remember that the internet is the mechanism by which we do all this connecting. The web is nothing more than a presentation layer, which, as I'll talk about in a minute, is what a financial statement is. It's a viewer into lots of different pieces, right? And so what intrigues me about XBRL is, and I like your term, Eric, the notion of Lego blocks. I usually talk about it as Velcro, but if you could put who into the equation, because every piece of data that's out there has some connection with some person, whether it's personal data or corporate data, then you can start to reassemble those Lego blocks in some really interesting ways. Right? And so something really important in my mind to think about is that the physical world and the virtual world don't work the same way. You don't have paper on the internet, right? And in the real world, you've got to come to Austin, Texas to go to South by Southwest. But in the world of the internet, I really go to Facebook.com. I mean, on the internet, I can be anywhere, everywhere, or nowhere at the same time, right? And so I think the thing that's really interesting about what cloud brings to the other side of the Lego block is, if it's not just linked data, but linked people, then can I create a very new logical model for the semantic web? So for really smart people like Michelle that are digging into the footnotes, or your dog, right? Instead of just having the very limited number of regulators at the SEC being able to look into all of these financial statements now and pluck out all the parts that they want, if I can suddenly start to reach into that data across the board, I suddenly could have 100,000 million people being regulators of some piece of data that they're interested in. Like the panel that was yesterday on corporate sustainability. I may want to go reach into that financial statement and pull out certain things. So one way to think of cloud's impact on all of this is, I may want a who in a company, like a business analyst, to only be able to tag themselves to certain pieces of data. But the controller or the CFO, well, they have more responsibility, right? I may want them to be able to tag to lots of pieces of data because they have more responsibility, and they may be able to see more pieces that are aggregated. But it's the same data. I'm just pivoting around it and looking at it in different ways. That's what cloud represents, is this notion that all of this stuff is going to be put into the guts of the internet. The other side of the Velcro is us, and this data goes across value chains, whether it's health or education.
So what I'm getting here is we have one source of data, and for the programmers and people who don't necessarily want to read the footnotes, some of us have been trained to spot inconsistencies using algorithms and try to seek out individual, why is this company different than another? And that's something XBRL can enable, and something we do at our organization is, industry analysis of why is somebody, not like their neighbor, and what are they trying to hide? And then, like Gary was saying, how do we create transparency? Well, my experience at the SEC is the SEC never finds Jack. It's always the people who are reading the footnotes and calling in and saying, SEC, I think something's happening here. Will you follow up and do the legal matters? Because I can't afford to. But it's the power to the people, and that's where XBRL is, and that's what we would love to have, coming from South by Southwest are people who are looking into this SEC standardized data and trying to leverage it. It's a government mandate. It's kind of a gift to a data user, a data nerd like myself. But how do you take the data and make it stand out?
So Jordan, I do just have to put in my little borders around it that XBRL is not synonymous with public information given to the SEC. There may be a realm of just within an organization itself that never goes to anyone other than the manager of that business or the owner of the business. So that may be that region that people will be able to benefit from, the transparency, the clarity, the consistency of information. It may be in SEC information, it may be another regulator, it may be environments like in Australia or the Netherlands where there's no mandate whatsoever, but there's a reduced compliance burden. Market demand, if you will, to make things more consistent.
And I don't know if people agree with me in that, how do you get standardized data? It's privatized unless we make people use the same one, and we're always going to try to recreate the wheel. But I agree with Eric. It's the financial data that's standardized isn't necessarily just about transparency and creating some regulation monitor their companies, but it also can give you an advantage for investment decisions. How do we create from the standardized data an investment model that will automatically populate when the company files their filing live and give me the investment decision material I need to go forward. And Michelle, I don't know if you can speak to reading the financials and trying to come up with the next big investment based on what they've read in the financial statement. Is XBRL going to enable people to do this faster, or is it something you have to read the context to actually go?
I mean, to me, I feel like it's not there yet. Obviously, I mean, I think that a lot of the really good information is just deeply buried, and until it's there for the taking to a certain extent, but it's not that easy to find, I guess is what I would think.
So Eric, what was XBRL intended for? Because I know you were there at the inception.
So we look at XBRL from its beginning, and many different forces. What was it intended to? It was intended to provide benefit to everybody that's involved with the creation, consumption, and value add to the data. It was designed so that companies, auditors, regulators, intermediaries, consumers, that everybody could get a win out of this, so that everybody holding hands could win. I had a meeting once as we were introducing XBRL into the Australian market. A dozen people around the table, regulators, bankers, filers, CPAs, and others. And you said, if we could reduce information friction within your organization, and as you shared with others, if we could reduce that information friction to next to nothing, would that be valuable to you? And the managers of businesses said, yeah, this is great, because we would have a real touch in our business. We would know what's going on. We'd be able to give it to others, and we'd be able to have our CPAs and business advisors give us information immediately and help us know what's going on. We talked to the bankers, and they said, yes, this would help us regulate. We talked to the CPAs, and they said, yes, we could provide better services. It would reduce our costs. It would reduce our errors. And we said, great. Are you willing to be the person who's going to take that first step and embrace XBRL? Each person pointed at someone else around the table and said, well, we can't do it until they do it. Why should we publish XBRL unless there's someone willing to use it? Why should we be ready to consume XBRL unless there's a lot of XBRL published? The goal of XBRL was to be, let's hold hands. I'm not to be too kumbaya here, but let's hold hands so that we can all take that step forward so that we can all benefit from this. Power to the people, regulating big business. Yes, it's great for us to get that transparency to help businesses both tell their own story and be held accountable for the story that they're talking about. I like to concentrate on the power to the people part. Not that XBRL is a bat to beat people down, but XBRL is something that can help people run their businesses better, communicate their situation, help the people who need to rely on it to get what they need. Power to the people with XBRL, and yes, regulating big business being an incredible responsibility we have, but making sure that everyone is benefiting from it. And that's what began XBRL, is everyone in the business reporting supply chain getting some benefit from more transparent, accurate, clear, consistent, reusable data.
And the reason it got there wasn't users of the data yet. There wasn't producers of the data. It really wasn't XBRL mandate that made this scenario happen. However, its intentions were great. It was the standard across all financials. But the same concept. I know that we have developers and programmers who here fights with developing amongst different platforms and trying to leverage the data, like between all the different platforms. That's like a major issue, and I'm looking at certain heads nodding. XBRL is just one standard for financial reporting. It's a similar concept that Gary talks about with cloud computing. How could that be applied to other industries? Maybe like a healthcare industry, or even our personal lives, that we don't have to we know who we are. Can Facebook know who I am? Can my tax filer know who I am? How does the cloud concept take this kind of XBRL genesis and use it in other areas?